So it looks like Canada and the US are in the midst of a trade war, and everyone seems to have an opinion on this, so I thought, why not? I'll share my opinion as well. I want to go over Trudeau's announcement that he made, I think yesterday or Saturday, I think it was yesterday actually, invoking counter-tariffs on the US. But before I get into that, I just want to note that, and maybe I'm being a little oversensitive here, but it seems like there's some memories of COVID. We're all in this together, and looking on Twitter and this idea of we're all rallying around a single cause. And I'm not saying the cause is necessarily wrong or bad, but I'm just a little bit sensitive that we seem to be, as a whole group, heading into one direction. And I'm not sure if that's the wisest thing. I'm not sure if perhaps a wait and see approach or just maybe not reacting in the moment might be a better approach. But anyway, I'll get to that. Let's have a look at Trudeau's announcement from yesterday.
Bonsoir. Good evening. Today, the United States informed us they will be imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States and 10% on Canadian energy. A decision that, should they elect to proceed with, should take effect on Tuesday, February 4th. Cette décision met en péril une relation économique de richesse. Tonight, first, I want to speak directly to Americans, our closest friends and neighbors. This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people.
Okay, so right there he's saying that Trump's tariffs on Canada are going to affect Americans. And I think Trudeau's right about that. And it's interesting what he says, because he talks about how these tariffs are going to be bad for the Americans. And yet, as we'll see in a few minutes, he's going to announce that he's going to put tariffs on US products coming into Canada. And I know, in my opinion, I think everyone loses in this kind of trade war. And I mean, the problem with this started long before yesterday, frankly. And anyway, we'll get into this. But it seems to me that Trudeau has lost his confidence in, well, his own party. He's prorogued Parliament. He's, a lame duck leader, and by that I mean technically he's on his way out, and yet he is making some major decisions about our largest trading partner. And my sense here, and maybe he's thought it through, maybe he's got great advisors, but my sense is he's reacting emotionally and he's making some pretty big commitments, and his overall tactic, I think, might be wrong-headed, and I'll get into that in a minute. But first, a little bit more from our Prime Minister.
As I have consistently said, tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery stores and gas at the pump. They will impede your access to an affordable supply of vital goods crucial for U.S. security, such as nickel, potash, uranium, steel, and aluminum.
So if all those things are true, for the American tariffs hurting Americans, and certainly they'd be true for the Canadian tariffs on American goods hurting Canadians. One thing that I think is lost on a lot of people is a lot of people are really excited, like, good job, Trudeau, we'll teach Trump a lesson. That what he's announcing, and he hasn't announced it yet, but these counter tariffs are a tax. They're a tax on Canadians, just like the American tariffs are a tax on Americans. And I think our economy is already in pretty rough shape, and I just fear that this is going to make things much, much worse. The other thing that I'm aware of here, or it strikes me, is you've got Trudeau at the podium, at the lectern, with tough talk. He's trying to be firm, And ordinarily that might work, but who is he going up against? He's going up against Trump. And I don't know that this is going to work ultimately. I guess we should talk about why is Trump putting these tariffs on Canada. I don't know that anyone really knows, perhaps not even Trump. There's a few different hypotheses out there, and I think it might actually be a combination of them. Let me cover the ones that come to my mind anyway. One, I think perhaps Trump wants to increase his tax base so that he can cut U.S. taxes elsewhere. So he's going to increase the revenue from tariffs from Canada, China, and Mexico so that he can lower taxes somewhere else. So he can say, look at me, I've lowered taxes. It might be that. Two, I think it might be that Trump wants to assert his will on other countries that in his mind haven't been pulling their weight in terms of NATO, in terms of border defense and that kind of thing, fentanyl. I'm not sure if fentanyl coming into the U.S. from Canada is really a big problem. Maybe it is, I don't know. But Trump seems to think it is. And whether that's true or not, we have to deal with Trump. But what gets me here is Trump is, whether you like him or not, this isn't an opinion about Trump, but I think people on his side and against him would say that he is brash, he is cocky, he is over the top, he's a showman, he's a deal maker, all these things. And it seems like Trudeau is trying to answer Trump with a Trumpian response. And my concern is Trudeau especially, and perhaps not anyone, probably not anyone, is going to be able to out-Trump Trump at his own game. You're not going to win by being a bigger Trump to Donald Trump than Donald Trump is, if you follow. I think what we need as Canadians is someone who's more shrewd, who is going to be a little more subtle and not try to take Trump on, head first. Now, of course, the big problem here is a lot of the weakness in our country, I think, is because of our governance for the last number of years. At the provincial level and certainly at the federal level as well. We have been dependent on U.S. trade. We've known this for years, and yet we're waiting till now to do something about it. We knew that Trump was a possibility. Like, he was one of the two candidates for the 2024 election. Like, we should have seen this coming. Also, I might remind you, he was president from 2016 to 2020. We know what Trump is about. Why are we caught flat-footed now? Another reason that comes to mind as to why Trump might be doing this is one, could be to get a better trade deal once we get through this. I also think it's a way for Trump to sort of punish his perceived enemies. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but seeing what he's doing in the US by dismantling DEI initiatives and that kind of thing, I think Canada as a country, and perhaps Trudeau specifically, is an avatar for, from Trump's point of view, left-wing thinking. And that's why I think it's really harmful to have Trudeau's face be the face of Canada when dealing with Trump. And just ask yourself, from what you know of Trump, whether you like him or not, how is Trump going to respond to tough talk from Trudeau? Do you really imagine that Trump is going to say, oh, shoot, if I had known that Trudeau was going to be upset with me, then, well, I'm going to back off. If anything, he's probably enjoying this. Oh, look, there's, Justin Trudeau clutching his pearls over my tariffs. I just question the wisdom of trying to match Trump's force. I think, I don't know what other options, frankly, Trudeau has. I think because he doesn't, if he was coming from a track record of credibility and good governance and good management, that might be a little bit different. But the fact that he's personally on his way out, his party is in tatters, like, he's not the person to be negotiating on our behalf. Given this, I would have preferred like a much lower profile response. But anyway, let's have a look at what else he has to say here.
They will violate the free trade agreement that the President and I, along with our Mexican partner, negotiated and signed a few years ago. But it doesn't have to be this way. As President John F. Kennedy said many years ago, geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity of Flanders to the streets of Kandahar.
Okay, now he's invoking all these times where Canada has helped the U.S., how we fought common causes in World War II and Korea. And I think those are true things, but I just think it's going to come up sounding pretty empty given sort of where we are. Whether it's right or wrong, I think in Trump's mind, in any way, we haven't been, pulling our own weight in terms of NATO. Whether you agree with NATO or not, sort of beside the point. So talking about World War II and Korea and Flanders Fields and things like that, I'm not sure that's really helpful. Even if I do believe, we are close cousins. There's been a lot of rhetoric online about, screw the Americans and this and that. And I mean, I've got cousins that are American. I have cousins that are Mexican, cousins that are Canadians. By and large, we're kind of similar people. Yeah, we have different countries, different histories, but the United States isn't our enemy, strictly speaking. And put aside what you think about Trump, historically we are neighbors, and it's a shame that I think through mismanagement and poor governance we've kind of got to this point.
We have fought and died alongside you. During your darkest hours, provided refuge to strand. As I've said before, if President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish us.
Strictly speaking, I agree with Trudeau there. That is the better path. But the bigger question is, why does Trump feel he needs to do this? What could we have done differently as Canadians to either avoid this or to be in a stronger position when this inevitably comes?
Canada has critical minerals, reliable and affordable energy, stable democratic institutions, shared values, and the natural resources you need.
Shared values. That's interesting. And I think that's maybe what Trudeau is missing here. And now, I don't know if he believes that's true, but I think increasingly there's been a division, again, it's a political one, where, Trudeau has been embracing, the World Trade Organization, Davos. He talked about us being a post-national state, if I recall, something to that effect, pushing a lot of the gender ideology. So are we really similar? I mean, I think there's lots of Canadians that don't agree with Trump, don't agree with Trudeau on these things. But I think the image, Trump he's a very visual guy. He's a media guy. He's not, as far as I know, like a deep reader. He sees sort of what comes across his media feed, so to speak, or what people point out to him. And if you look at the sound bites of Trudeau over the years, is he ideologically aligned with Trump and the American right? I don't know that he is. I mean, just how many weeks ago was it now, I guess, at the election, so in November, very shortly after that, Trudeau was basically scolding Americans for not electing a woman. So all those things, even though I think a lot of it from Trudeau is ultimately empty talk, these things matter. It creates different perceptions in the world. And you might think, well, we don't like Trump or he shouldn't have an effect. Well, you can think that or not, but he is now the president, the commander-in-chief, the head of the executive branch of our largest trading partner. And the perceptions that he holds in his head, whether you like them or not, or whether he ought to hold them or not, is beside the point. We have to deal with this. And it seems to me like we've spent so much time kind of navel-gazing as a country and becoming less and less serious that inevitably we get to this point. What else?
Canada has the ingredients necessary to build a booming and secure partnership for the North American economy, and we stand at the ready to work together. Let's take a moment to talk about our shared border. Our border is already safe and secure, but
Safe and secure reminds me of safe and effective. It sounds like a slogan. Is it safe? I don't know. Again, my sense is the Americans have a much bigger problem on their southern border, but perception with Trump is, I guess, for most intents and purposes, reality. So maybe instead of arguing with them, maybe it's a matter of some security theater, help them to believe that, we are improving our border.
there's always more work to do. Less than 1% of fentanyl, less than 1% of illegal crossings into the United States come from Canada. But hearing concerns from both Canadians and Americans, including the American president himself, we're taking action.
Okay, you're taking action now. Why haven't we been taking our borders seriously? As a sovereign country, if we believe in borders, why haven't we been taking it seriously? I know it's not the same thing, but a few years ago, there was all these images of Roxham Road where just the RCMP is carrying the bags of people just coming over the border. And there's been rhetoric from Trudeau and other people of the Liberal Party talking about how, the US's treatment of immigrants or migrants, illegal people entering is wrong. So he's been, picking on sort of Trump's policies, and now he seems upset that something's happening based on his rhetoric.
Launched a $1.3 billion border plan that is already showing results, because we too are devastated by the scourge that is fentanyl, a drug that is...
Glad to hear that. Yet it seems like it's the same government that seems to be promoting so-called safe injection sites and safe supply and that kind of thing.
Torn apart communities and caused so much pain and torment for countless families across Canada, just like in the United States. A drug that we too want to see wiped from the face of this. Canada will be responding to the US trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
So just for clarity, what that means is you as a Canadian will now be paying 25% tax. That's above and beyond the HST, the carbon tax, your income tax that you have to earn, they have to pay before you can even buy something. All of what you have already, that for every dollar you're spending in the US or on US products is now $1.25. So make no mistake that these counter tariffs are a new tax.
This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives.
That last bit there, in fairness, is maybe not a bad policy, giving people a chance to react. Again, I question these counter tariffs as especially the immediacy. Trump announces it and now we're striking back. And that can feel like tough. I get it. People are, we're not going to take that from Trump. I just question the wisdom of it ultimately. If you know your adversary, if you know what you're up against, I don't know, I just think there's a wiser way to deal with this. And that might be, he'll get to it later, but he mentions that he hasn't even spoken to Trump yet since Trump became president. I think he's actually speaking to him today as I record this on Monday. So that says a lot there about Trudeau's credibility. I think maybe a wiser approach would be not so much fanfare, just kind of a, hey, we're sorry to hear about these tariffs. We don't think it's right. We think it's ultimately going to hurt Americans, and we hope to discuss this with Trump. And then try to deal with this behind closed doors, help Trump save face somehow. And then again, I don't think Trudeau is the right person to do. I don't think he has credibility amongst Canadians, and I think that he has a negative effect on Trump. From what we know about Trump, like putting Trudeau in front of him is, we'd be better off sort of going to the Hamilton phone book and picking a random person to represent Canada, someone who doesn't have baggage with Trump. So Trudeau, whether you want to say it's his fault or not is beside the point. I don't think he has negative credibility with Trump, I believe. But the idea of the 21 days, does make sense. I think a better thing for Trudeau to have said was, we reserve the right to have some counter-tariffs, but we want to talk to the president first, but my team is looking at a response.
Ce soir, j'annonce la réplique du Canada. And materials like lumber and plastic in this together. The Canadian government.
Did you catch that?
With all that said, I also want to speak directly to Canadians in this moment. I'm sure many of you are anxious, but I want you to know we are all in this together.
We're all into this together. Does that sound familiar? 2 weeks to flatten the curve, safe and effective, follow the science. It kind of seems like sloganeering to rally around the flag. And I get it. Just seeing things online, people like this kind of stuff, but I question the wisdom of it.
The Canadian government, Canadian businesses, Canadian organized labor, Canadian civil society, Canada's premiers, and tens of millions of Canadians from coast to coast to coast are aligned and united.
Is that true? I don't know. It might be true in the moment. I don't know that we're as aligned as he's saying he is. I think this is more complicated. As bad as the American tariffs are on Canadian ones, immediately striking back is, I think frankly, if we go toe to toe, I think we're losing. One can think of tariffs as almost like a fever. So when you have like an infection or something, the virus or the pathogen doesn't do as well when your body gets hot, but also your immune system doesn't do as well. So the fever actually hurts both your immunity and the pathogen, but the idea being it hurts the pathogen more, so your immune system can get the upper hand, something like that. I'm not a doctor, but you get the idea. So I think by going like all out, I think the Americans can withstand this much more easily than we can for a number of reasons, and here are a few that come to mind. One, Trump has a mandate. He just won an election. He's got a 4-year term. He can actually spend some political capital, even if it makes the economy in the States get a little bit worse in the near term. He's doing enough things that are getting his base excited, like opposing DEI, deporting illegal immigrants, etc., etc. So that person who's, I don't know, maybe he's a contractor and he's saying, well, you know what? The Canadian lumber that I was getting is now more expensive. I don't really like that Trump did that, but Trump is doing all these other things. You know what? I'm still behind him. I think there's a larger case in the States. In Canada, I don't think we have that, frankly. I think we're going to get it twice. So I think of, picture a manufacturing company in, say, Southern Ontario, where I live. So because of Trump, the stuff that they ship into the States is going to be less competitive. So that sucks. But now because of Trudeau, all this stuff that they get from the States to help manufacture those things, and a lot of that could be like things like machinery and tooling and industrial supplies and that kind of thing. A lot of that stuff does still come from the States. A lot of it comes from China and Europe as well, but a lot of it comes either from the States or through the States. So now that company that's making widgets in Southern Ontario to sell them to the States, because of Trump, they're less competitive, but now because of Trudeau, their input costs are going up as well. So it's taking a bad situation and making it worse. And for what? Are we going to Like, what's the end game here? I think the end game, frankly, is a new government and someone who can more shrewdly and more wisely negotiate with Trump, help him feel that he won. Because he's got a big ego, we should be using this to our advantage. You know, he wants his strokes. He wants to be seen as the big macho guy. It's obvious. Like, we've seen Trump. So we need to, let him feel that he won, appeal to his ego, tell him the right story. But going head to head, I don't see this going well for Canada, frankly. And some of this other stuff, and I'll finish up with this. There's more I could say about the video. Echoes of COVID, this, we're going to unite. Some of the stuff the premiers are doing is also pretty ridiculous in my mind. As I record this, I think several premiers have indicated that the liquor supply that they control in their own province, specifically like in Ontario, the LCBO, Doug Ford is saying he's getting rid of all American liquor and wine, etc. Now, this doesn't personally affect me. I don't purchase American booze, but it's kind of it seems like the same reaction when people were cordoning off playgrounds at the height of COVID. Everyone's kind of panicked. We got to do this thing, and oh my goodness, and quick, let's do some policy. But it's ridiculous. So now in the LCBO, we're now paying government workers to take wine and liquor physically off the shelves, box it up, load it into trucks, presumably send it to some kind of warehouse. I guess we're going to pay to warehouse it for how long? I don't know. To empty the shelves. Meanwhile, if these tariffs are going to have the effect that we think they will, then all that Californian wine is going to be more expensive anyway. It's probably going to move off the LCBO shelves more slowly. So I think a better thing to do would be, like, if the American wine is not selling, then maybe we stop ordering as much of it for LCBO and we transition normally anyway. But this whole show of force, and we're going to, I think it was the BC Premier, Eby, I think it's pronounced. He's talking about how, like, government projects now won't source things from the States. So all this stuff sounds like really mighty and, we're going to show the Americans. But what it means is we have less choice. Now, so in Ontario anyway, it seems, whether you're willing to pay the 25% or not, you now just can't get, Kentucky bourbon or whatever it is, or Californian wine. So it's your premier who's making that decision for you, which, again, it sounds kind of heavy-handed, where we have these politicians that know better than us, so they're going to tell us what we can and can't have. And there's a whole bunch of people really excited about it. I don't think it's going to last. I think people, there might be people cheering Doug Ford on today, but what about in a month or 3 months? Like, you know what? I'm not really a wine person, but maybe there's Californian wine that's really good and you're willing to pay more, or it's at a restaurant, or it's a special occasion. Who knows? Maybe you're a wine collector. But now Doug Ford is saying, well, because we need to show Trump a lesson, you can't even get that wine, even if you're willing to pay the 25%. To me, we're getting spun out of control, reacting to something, when really what we should have been doing, there is one bright spot in here, I think, and I haven't talked about Poilievre. He's also talking about, retaliatory tariffs. And now I think it's a little bit different coming from him, and that's because I don't think he has the baggage that Trudeau has. So everything else being equal, if it's coming from Poilievre's mouth to Trump's ears, even if the message is exactly the same, I think it's going to be more readily received from Poilievre than from Trudeau. But even putting that aside, it seems like Poilievre is also talking about tariffs. He seems to be a little bit more sober-minded about how this is actually going to hurt both countries. He's a little more emphatic there. But anyway, my point is, we seem to be getting into reactionary mode, where really we should have been managing well, all this time. And the one thing I was going to say about Poilievre that I think is a bright spot here is maybe, just maybe, this is an opportunity politically to begin to break down some of the interprovincial trade barriers, which have been a problem in Canada for a long time, where we trade north-south, but not east-west very well. So maybe this is an opportunity to try to get rid of some of the provincial protectionism that provinces have traditionally used against one another, and maybe get more internal trade. I don't think it's going to fix the whole problem. I think ultimately we need a new government. We need to get back to, so I saw something on Twitter, and she didn't say this, this was my comment. We need to make politics boring again. Just like boring, competent politicians that can print passports, that can manage the military, that can, deal with trade and transportation issues. The fact that this is coming into our living rooms and we're all getting riled up on Facebook about where can we buy Canadian, etc., to me shows that we haven't enjoyed good governance for a while. And it's both sides of the spectrum. I mean, Doug Ford, and he seems to be just reacting just as badly as Trudeau. Anyway, it's a little disheartening because I'm not a huge fan of Trump. I think he's kind of juvenile and impulsive, but it seems like we're doing the same thing over here. And my fear is, until we get some grown-ups in the room, some people who have some wisdom, who have maybe a more nuanced approach, who are a little bit more subtle, going to be a little bit more shrewd, like this is just going to be a race to the bottom. You let me know what you think. Am I out to lunch here? Am I not being patriotic enough because I don't support these as vociferously as others do? Am I missing something here? I'm not a trade expert. I'm not an economics major, but my instinct, hearing some of these COVID slogans, and we're all in this together and we're going to rally around, it just doesn't seem like it's going to end well. But maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. You let me know what you think. Leave the comments below. Thanks for watching.